So the Nintendo Switch Online service is good, but you don't really feel like you own the games. Now we've created a list here that's a bit unique in that you will actually be able to purchase all of these titles, and in fact you can't even get them on the Switch Online service.
So for today's video then, we're going to look at some Super Nintendo games that are available to play on the Nintendo Switch but aren't actually on the Nintendo Switch Online app. This means that these games are available to play without any sort of subscription, but most, if not all, of these games are actually available to buy physically too.
So what are they? Well, let's find out.
So the first one then is the game Zombies, or Zombies Ate My Neighbours as it's better known, and was released as in some regions. Now this is a top-down game where you need to defeat a number of different monster-themed enemies, zombies being obviously the iconic one as per the title, and find and rescue your neighbours before moving on to the next level.
Yeah, I remember playing this one back in the day. I can't remember which platform. Was it only released on the SNES?
It was on the Mega Drive as well, I believe.
I was going to say, I played it on the Mega Drive. You could like bounce on trampolines, couldn't you?
You could, yeah, and go over fences to get to your neighbours and what have you. Now this is available on a collection with obviously Zombies, but also Ghoul Patrol, which was its sequel. Not as well known or as well loved, that one. I did own that one on the SNES back in the day actually. But both good games, I mean the first one being the better of the two, and definitely a game that's worth playing today just to experience. It's got a huge amount of levels, good themes, very quirky titles that kind of reference pop culture and horror movies of the past. Really good game to play, and it's available in 2-player too. Then we have a fantastic game on the Super Nintendo, and that's Super Castlevania IV. Now this is available via the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. It does have a physical, albeit I believe it was from Limited Run Games, so it might be quite hard to find now, but the digital version does go on sale very regularly and is available for, stupid cheap prices at those times.
So with the Castlevania IV, I haven't actually played this one. I started the collection, I've started 1 and 2. Did they change anything up for this fourth outing?
So the first game was very much kind of left to right, standard platforming, difficult game. The second one in the series, which was called Simon's Quest, that's the one that changed things up. That was a very different sort of game. People are very divided on that one as to whether it's a good game or not. Castlevania 3 kind of went back to its roots in terms of making it a bit more traditional, albeit expanded on some of those ideas. Super Castlevania 4 kind of took the original game and almost remade it for the 16-bit era, and it added a few things such as being able to shoot your whip or whip if you like in 8 directions as opposed to 4, and just that little tweak made a huge difference to the gameplay.
So then you've got The Secret of Mana. Now this was part of a collection, right?
Yep, this was on the collection of Mana, which had 3 games on it. You had the first Mana game, which was actually packaged as a Final Fantasy game outside of Japan to kind of jump on the bandwagon of that series at the time. And then Secret of Mana was its sequel and was on, obviously, the Super Nintendo. The other game on that collection is Seiken Densetsu 3, which is now known as Trials of Mana, another very good Super Nintendo game. This one here, The Secret of Mana, it allowed for up to 3 players if you had the multi-tap on the Super Nintendo, which was something that didn't happen very often back then. It's an action RPG, and it was one of those games during that era of RPGs that really started to, wise people up as to what an RPG could be. Obviously you'd had a lot of turn-based ones at this point, and this being more action-based and real-time combat. I think it kind of started to expand that RPG legacy across away from Japan, and is a much loved game.
I would love to see more modern RPGs with co-op.
Yeah, for sure.
Something that doesn't really exist, doesn't
Certainly
it?
3-player or more than 2-player at least, and yeah, this was a bit of a pioneer in that respect. Then you have Contra 3, or Super Probotector as it was called in some regions. Now this is on the Contra Anniversary Collection, much like the Castlevania one from Konami that I mentioned earlier. It's another one that does have a physical, but it's very expensive now. But it's another one that goes on sale for stupidly cheap pretty often. So the Contra games started on the NES. You had Contra, and then you had, I think it was called Super C, was its sequel. Run and gun games, of course, very, very difficult, very satisfying though as you start to get through them. Co-op again, and Contra 3 just took everything those games did and blew them up onto the, for the 16-bit era. It's just things like, things that maybe some people wouldn't be as impressed by these days, but taking the idea of the pure gameplay, which was great, and then adding that cinematic side that the 16-bit era could provide, relatively speaking, it just made some of these games that were on the NES, it gave them a whole new life already. You know, and this is a great game. Very, very difficult, but well worth playing.
Very cool. Yeah, so I've only played a lot of these for the first time, delving into retro handhelds and stuff. And yeah, the Contra ones, it's surprising how well they hold up.
It really is. Yeah, it's that classic, one-hit kills, for you and the enemies, just constantly moving, no time to think, no time to stop. It works so well. It's that classic arcade formula brought to consoles at the time. Now we have one that, I don't know, some people might not like. It's a game that split opinion back in the day. It's Jurassic Park, and this is available on the Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection, which came out quite recently. I think it's another one that Limited Run Games have picked up, but of course you can buy that digital collection as well. Now, the reason this split opinion is because the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive versions were very different. The Mega Drive version was almost like a run and gun or a platformer where you played as Alan Grant, just shooting dinosaurs. Whereas the Super Nintendo version was a little more methodical. It played from a top-down view. It was a bit more of a, I suppose, Zelda-light in some respects, in terms of, searching for items and having to unlock gates or find your way about places. And its major flaw back in the day, which the Switch solves, is it didn't have a save feature.
Right, okay.
So you had to finish it in one go, which was, ridiculous, or leave your Super Nintendo on for hours at a time. And obviously on the Switch, that's not a problem. So if you want to experience this game and remove that fault or that flaw, then this is the way to do it. And what this also included, quite interestingly, is it had some first-person levels, almost like first-person shooter levels, which again, just you didn't see much of back then,
Yeah, I was actually watching my son play this the other day, and he got to that level where it was inside the building and it went to the first-person view, and I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
The Game Boy version, is that on this pack as well?
It includes, as far as I can remember, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and possibly Mega Drive.
Yeah, because the Game Boy was the one I played, and that had that top-down perspective, and it played like the SNES version. Good game.
Yeah, worth experiencing for sure. Right, now my favourite one of all of these games, this is Turtles in Time.
You don't like that.
This is a cracking game. This is such a good game. So this is on the Cowabunga collection, and this does have a physical, and it is one that you can find, at least where I've seen it, relatively cheap now. It's one that's starting to leave store shelves, not because it's limited or anything like that, just because I suppose, new stock comes in and they want to start recycling their stuff. But if you can find it, you'll find it for a decent price. This has a huge number of games on it. It actually has the arcade version of Turtles in Time as well as the Super Nintendo version, and they are quite different actually, and people will have their preference. Some of the things that added for the Super Nintendo version were levels that changed up the bosses. So you had the Rat King appeared as a boss in one level. Bebop and Rocksteady were also added to the game on the pirate ship level, and it also made use of the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 as well in some of the ways that you defeated certain bosses. It was 2-player as opposed to 4, which the arcade was, which was a shame, but if you've got 2 versions on this collection, you can mix and match and choose the one that suits you best.
Doesn't have beating up a car between stages though, does it?
No, it doesn't. The Turtles weren't really into all that. But no, this is a fantastic game. One of the best beat-em-ups, in my opinion, of all time. I would say the newer Turtles game that came out a couple of years back on the Switch or on modern consoles, it probably supersedes this or improves on this game. But in terms of seeing where it all started, this is an absolute cracker. Also on that collection is the Turtles Tournament Fighters, which was a Super Nintendo game. So there's just another little bonus one on there as well.
Lovely. Then we've got Aladdin. Now, that's been on loads of different systems. I think I played this on the Mega Drive.
Yeah, you would have done. It would have been a very different game, though. This has got quite an interesting story as well,
okay.
in that the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive versions were very different. Now, this is available on the Disney Classic Games collection, but it's important to say that they made a version of this collection that had the Mega Drive Aladdin, and it had the Lion King on there. They then re-released it with the Jungle Book on it, and that's the version that has the Super Nintendo version of Aladdin on. So if you're looking to buy this, you want the one that has the Jungle Book on it. That's the one that's got the SNES Aladdin. So just be aware of that. It's a bit confusing. But back to the game itself. Now, Disney were very involved in the Mega Drive Aladdin, and they had, I think it was Virgin Games, do the artwork. But they were heavily involved to the point where it looks delightful, to be fair. It looks like a Disney cartoon at times, whereas Capcom handled the Super Nintendo version, and it was pixel based. Now, I actually love this game, this Super Nintendo one. This was the one I played as a kid. This is the one I prefer. I would always say the Mega Drive one is a bit more fighting based and less linear. The Super Nintendo one is more platforming based and a bit more straightforward. So you can kind of pick your poison, but obviously they're both on the collection anyway. Yeah, this game just captures the charm of that film really, really well. You know, the levels are based on scenes from the movie. There's even a scene of the the carpet ride with Aladdin and Jasmine, which has no bit, you don't do anything other than collect gems. It's like a bonus stage, but it's there. It has the music in the background. Was it Whole New World?
Oh yeah.
It's just a great game. Really, really fun to play.
And difficult games as well. So having those little downtime stages made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would say, I don't think anyone would argue that the Mega Drive one was more difficult than the Super Nintendo one. But again, by this collection, you've got both games. Super Turrican is next. Now, this is available on the Turrican Flashback collection. There are other ways to play it as well. There's a couple of other Turrican collections. This is probably the cheapest and easiest way to play it. This collection includes Turrican and Turrican 2 from the Amiga, Super Turrican and Mega Turrican from the Mega Drive. Now, Super Turrican was the only one of this series I'd played back in the day, despite the fact I owned like a Commodore 64. I just never experienced the Turrican series. And again, it's one that kind of took the original game and remade it to a degree. Yeah. So the Turrican series, it's a run and gun, a bit like Contra that we had before, but the difference here was that the levels were much less linear. You could explore a huge amount of enemies thrown at you at any one time. Really difficult games. I would say Super Turrican is one of the easier ones. Okay. But again, it's a collection of 4 games, and you can try them all and kind of find your favourite. But it is another way to find and own, actually, proper own a Super Nintendo game on the Switch. Then we have a new release in terms of the Switch, obviously an old game. That's Super Double Dragon. Now, Double Dragon has been on the Switch in a number of different ways. We've had the NES version, we've had the original arcade. We haven't had the Super Nintendo one until about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, give or take. And it is available physically, albeit I think for now it's only in Japan.
Ooh, where would you buy that?
There is a link below if you fancy it. I did buy this myself the other day, actually, and it has the collection for this particular physical version has Super Double Dragon, and it has the Game Boy Advance Double Dragon on there too.
Nice.
If you just want the Super Nintendo one, you can buy it on its own on the eShop. It's one of the ones that you don't need a collection for, and it's about £5.
Okay, so this was in the arcades originally, like Double Dragon?
Double Dragon was, absolutely. It then came across to the NES. I think I'm right in saying, apologies if I'm not, that the first NES game dropped co-op, which was kind of what you wanted Double Dragon for. They rectified that with the sequel on the NES. Obviously, the SNES one has it. Really good game, well worth picking up. If you don't want the physical, £5 for the digital, buy it, it's great. And finally, this one perhaps a little contentious in terms of this list, not in terms of the game, and I'll explain why in a minute, but it's Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, so we had the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, and that's probably where the contention comes from because they're not the exact same versions.
Yes, yeah, there are some remastered elements to it. The reason I put it on here in the end is because the eShop makes a point of specifically saying it's based on the 1994 original.
Yeah.
You can switch between new music and old, so you can have the classic music, and the remastered element, whilst it polishes up the graphics, it doesn't change them past their original intentions.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to have it on here. Again, you can buy it as part of that collection that Mark mentioned, or you can buy it separately, which is good to know if you just want that one game. And this is, I mean, again, one of the best RPGs I think of all time. You know, it does have its moments where it shows its age, but if you just want to see where RPGs came from and how they started, there's no better example than this game. It's set in a world where magic is outlawed and kind of machinery has started to take its place, so it has like a steampunk feel to it. And there's a scene, I mean, I'm talking right early on, it might even be the opening credit scroll, where you have like these mechs walking away from the camera on the snow, and it's just incredible. You know, if you play it back in the day and you're used to kind of simple games, and then you see this opening scene and the music that goes with it, you know, you knew you were in for something special.
Yeah, it's funny how many of these seem to have influenced each other. You know, I'm playing Xenogears at the moment for the first time on the PlayStation, and then Xenoblade Chronicles X. You know, there's a big crossover for a lot of these.
Absolutely, and I mean, for me, the 16-bit era is a very special one because I feel like a lot of developers cut their teeth during the 8-bit era and started to really refine the ideas in the 16-bit era. And a lot of these games you can see kind of the 8-bit equivalents of in their prequels or, you know, their predecessors. And this is where they really started to, if not perfect, at least develop games that were of such a standard that they were starting to be worthy of their prices. Do you know what I mean? And they, for the most part, you know, they're still so playable to this day. And as I say, if you've got Switch Online, you won't be able to play any of these games on there, and they are available to actually own, which is great.
Exactly right. Yeah, so a list of games that you can actually own rather than you know, having to have the online subscription. Let us know any that you've seen that you think we should talk about. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, I will say all 10 of these were kind of off the top of my head because I wanted to pick games that I clearly had something to say about because they were the first ones I thought of. So if you can think of any others, please do stick them below and maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point.
Now, if you're making any digital purchases, do use our code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg to get your little cash back. It's about 5% and that goes onto your account for use when you're buying your next credit.
There's also a link down there to Play Asia. All jokes aside, some of these are available that way if you are wanting a physical version. And just a thank you to our patrons and all of you for watching our content. Take care and happy gaming.